Well, this will be a follow-up. As you said, the British Parliament did vote down any military action in Syria. And not only that, they also forced Prime Minister Cameron to deny any recourse to the use of the royal prerogative, which, of course, in England, the crown is sovereign, and under their non-existent constitution, you don't need parliamentary approval or not. However, ironically, in this situation, the tables have turned, and now Obama is looking like he will evoke royal prerogative, even though this is supposedly the United States of America. Now, over the last 48 hours, what we've been seeing is an extraordinary kickback from senior members of the military, both in the UK and here in the United States. And on both sides of the Atlantic, the obvious parallels are being drawn to the Iraq invasion based on falsified intelligence, which is something which you were intimately involved in at that time. Two of the highest-ranking former generals in the United States, Anthony Zinni and Barry McCaffrey, have both gone on television over the last 24 hours with major television interviews strongly opposing Obama's rush into war. So this is an indication of what's happening on the inside of the U.S. military. And finally, apropos to what you just raised about guts, it seems like some members of Congress are beginning to grow a spine and stand up in defense of the constitutional separations of power when it comes to war, as mandated in the U.S. Constitution. As people know, there's been a letter that has circulated from Virginia Congressman Scott Ridgell, which has now gained almost 150 co-sponsors, which is both Republicans and Democrats. This is saying that if engaging our military in war in Syria when there's no direct threat to the United States and without prior congressional authorization would violate the separation of powers that is clearly delineated in the Constitution. And there's also a similar letter from Representative Barbara Lee with 53 co-sponsors now, the heads of the Congressional Black Caucus and the Progressive Caucus. And then finally, of course, Congressman Walter Jones has his HCR 30, which states that going to war without the consent of Congress is unconstitutional and indeed constitutes an impeachable offense. Now, these statements have been reiterated today on television interviews. Scott Ridgell pointed out the irony of the British Parliament engaging in a robust debate while the United States Congress is nowhere to be found. Senator Rand Paul emphasized that under our Constitution, Congress authorizes war and nobody else. And then, as was said by many people, the situation now looks very much like Obama is operating as if he has the king's army, an executive with absolutely no bound. So the situation that we found ourselves in even prior to this week, even before the drums of war started beating, was that the temperature was already rising around the issue of impeachment. Numerous congressmen had begun invoking the impeachability of President Obama already. Senator Tom Coburn had said at a town hall meeting that Obama is perilously close to being impeachable. Representative Blake Farenthold told a town hall meeting in his district that he believes that there would probably be sufficient votes in the U.S. House to impeach Obama. So, in light of the immediate danger now of war being launched, would you concur that the most appropriate action, the most appropriate course of action that Congress could take at this moment would be immediately to fly back to Washington, reconvene, and begin impeachment proceedings at the soonest possible date?
In principle, those are the measures that must be taken. We cannot leave this thing handling as a gambling game. That's where we stand. And what we need is really an impeachment of this president, because we have crisis, a monetary crisis, a financial crisis, and related crises which must be dealt with. And as long as this president lingers on, and as long as his supporters linger on in this thing, we have a mess. What we need immediately is a Glass-Steagall reenactment. Just plain reenactment. No frou-frous, no changes, no nothing. Just reenact the original bill. That's the best way to do it. It avoids the need to have a discussion of a change. And the original bill is sufficient for its purposes, under these conditions especially, and therefore we should just stick to reenacting Glass-Steagall, period. Now what that would do, it would eliminate, as we know, it would cause a chain reaction which would eliminate Wall Street as a factor. Wall Street might still exist in reduced capacity because Wall Street has outstanding recirculating debts in perpetuity. Now that is obviously junk, and somebody is going to have to clean that mess up. The best way to do it is put in Glass-Steagall immediately, reenact Glass-Steagall, assemble to do that. That will solve the problem, because it will solve also the problem of how we are going to have to react in order to restore the economy that the previous two presidencies, Bush and Obama, have ruined. I mean, there were messes and problems before then. But it was when young Bush came in and then Obama that the real mess occurred, the damage. So what we want to do is we get back to the point before young Bush became president, clean the mess up there, and then go to the process, the congressional process, the other processes of cleaning up the act and cleaning up the mess afterward. But we're going to have to go back to a original Glass-Steagall immediately. If you try to modify it, adjust it, and so forth, you're going to create a debatable mess. And what we need is very clear direction now. We have to restore the U.S. economy, which does not virtually exist now. The only way we can do that is Glass-Steagall, the original Glass-Steagall, and put that to work immediately. Because we have a starving population, we have crises, all kinds of things, messes. And we've got to get a very simple, clear action which restores the United States to a Glass-Steagall policy. If that is done, then ordinary legislation and other measures, related measures, will be sufficient to restore the functioning of the economy. There'll be lots of things that have to be done. But with Glass-Steagall installed, we are then in a situation to go back to normal, or to what we were before. And that's what we've really got to. We've got to think in terms of not the merits of this legislation, or that legislation, or this debate, or that debate. We don't have the time. And we can't take drastic measures without precedent. So therefore we have to return to the Glass-Steagall standard, reenact Glass-Steagall immediately, and let the effect of reenacting Glass-Steagall have the impact which does the job for us of creating the situation where we can go back to business.